So welcome everyone. My name is Jan Lehman. I'm the owner of CTC Productivity. I'm super happy you're here. And with me today is one of my wonderful, wonderful team members, Arnie House. Arnie is a business process improvement guru, and in addition, a Microsoft 365 expert. So he's got a powerful skill set. We do have a number of new faces on the call today. We're super excited about that. So to let you know our format, we have been doing these webinars on Microsoft 365 and how to leverage the power of it. We've been doing it about a little over a year and a half. And the way we structure it is we'll do a deeper kind of 20-minute dive on a particular topic and then open it up for Q&A. Feel free at any point, if you have a burning question already, feel free to enter that in the chat and we'll make sure we answer it either during the Q&A time. And today the topic's actually, we're going to start a little mini series. And so today the topic is actually, it's really the mini series is geared toward leadership. So super happy that we've got some representatives here for their leaders to take good notes. And I would encourage you to go get a recording of this session afterwards, which you can get on our website, and get a recording afterwards and send it to your senior leadership, because this topic is definitely geared more toward the leadership team. So in the mini series, the first thing we're going to talk about today is really strategy and expectations around adopting 365. And then next month, we're actually then going to be talking about the importance of, before you roll 365 or the team's environment out to the whole company, you really do want to be customizing an environment and doing training on your personally set up environment, not just doing training kind of generically. So those are the sessions that we've got scheduled. In the chat, there are some links for you. If you want to register for the August webinar, there's a link in there for that. If you're curious about any of our past recordings, those are out on the CTC website. There's a link there that takes you to it. At the top of the page is where you register for any of the webinars, and at the bottom is actually the recordings. Or if you want to go directly to YouTube and just see all of them, that's easy too. You can just subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then also the last link is just signing up for a newsletter to get advance notice of when we're having webinars and things coming up. So that is the plan. And so I'm going to do a couple slides and then I'm going to turn over to Arnie for our content for today. So at CTC Productivity, we are focused on helping companies run more efficiently. And there's a lot of levers we can pull. Could be teaching somebody how to run an effective meeting, how to be an effective delegator. But a huge area of opportunity that we've noticed over the last couple of years has been leveraging the power of 365. So we're super excited to be in front of you and talking about these topics. What we're seeing with a lot of the companies that we're working with are recurring themes of issues and challenges that businesses are having with everybody working in a team environment. So this is the list. So death by meetings, the way we collaborate, the way we communicate, how do we plan when we work together? And the good news is Microsoft 365 really addresses all of these issues. So if in your company, you can look at this list and say, oh, that's a huge issue for us. I'm super happy you're here, because you should definitely be considering the Microsoft 365 platform. The world has changed, as we all know, and I don't think we all knew, like, are we going to stay hybrid or what's going to happen? But there's no question hybrid is not going away. This is pretty much where most businesses stand right now in employee preferences. Some want to be 100% remote, but a vast majority want hybrid. So again, very lucky to have technology like Microsoft 365 that makes that so much easier for everybody in the company. So that's perfect. And then lastly, these are just some statistics from Forrester about the value of 365. I have to say it's been a very interesting journey. I do a lot of presenting to CEO peer groups, which is super fun. And so it's representatives from different companies. And it used to be kind of just me in the room talking about 365 and how awesome it was and the value of it. And now, typically when I'm speaking, there's at least one or two companies that have pretty much adopted it and they are singing its praises, which is way better than a consultant saying it's awesome. So anyway, there's just great. So if you don't know about 365, you haven't drank the Kool-Aid yet, certainly listen to everything we say, but I would go back and talk to your colleagues and ask who's on it, who's using it, what do you think, and see if it's the right next step for you. So on that note, I will turn it over to Arnie. And I'll just, I want to make one kind of comment about this series. So I'm super excited that we picked this topic today and created a little mini series, because Arnie and Nancy and I and Rafe and our whole team, we're working with tons of businesses. And one of the challenges we're seeing in many of the businesses is that it's the technical groups or it's a small pilot group trying to push this technology forward. And so we're recognizing that it really is a leadership challenge. It's not a technology project. Sorry, Arnie, if I, a little spoiler alert there. But this is a really important message. So if you're very serious about trying to get 365 to be fully adopted in your company, you are in the right place to hear this topic today. So take her away, Arnie.
All right, thanks, Jan. Glad everybody's here. Hope you're having a good summer. And speaking of technology challenges, we are sorely missing our teammate Nancy right now. I am wearing two hats in this webinar, as is Jan. So apologies in advance. And actually, after I messed up the beginning and clicked through some slides, but we'll get there. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I have seen organizations struggle needlessly to implement teams, and it's not hard to implement teams, but unfortunately they don't teach that in business school or coming up through the ranks. So you got to kind of find your way on your own. Hopefully we can save you a lot of headaches by what we're going to share today and in the next couple webinars. A little bit of a fun thing here. I wanted to show some videos, but the fellow who owns this 11foot8.com is pretty protective of his stuff. But if you have 5 or 10 minutes and you just want to get away from work for a minute, go to 11foot8.com and watch these videos. There are 176 of them right now. And most of them are rental trucks trying to get under an 11foot8 bridge. This is in Durham, North Carolina. And I can tell you for a fact, especially after watching many of those videos, that 100% of the time, a 12-foot truck will not fit under an 11foot8 bridge. And just as certain as I am that a 12-foot truck cannot fit under an 11foot8 bridge, I am certain that without leadership taking charge, and as I have seen it in almost, well, probably 100% of the clients, and when I was in the corporate world, 100% of the departments that I worked with, it will struggle. And let's get into how to make teams successfully be adopted by meeting two conditions. And I'll get to those two conditions shortly. But first, I want to emphasize Microsoft Teams success is not caused by technology training. Too many organizations think, oh, this cool technology, let's cram everybody into a computer lab or do a Teams meeting and teach people how to use Teams. And unfortunately, for most people, unless they're really tech savvy, that is like drinking from a fire hose. The technology is very cool, but there's too much of it. People are overwhelmed, they leave, and most of them go out, give it a good college try, but then it just doesn't go anywhere. So if it's not a training issue, what is it? Well, Microsoft Teams success is caused by business leadership, not training. You've got to have the business leadership on board and leading the charge. A lot of times when I work with clients, a potential client, they say, hey, let me get you in touch with our IT department or our computer guy. And I can tell you that that is not the people I want to see. I want to talk to the leadership because we're going to improve processes. We're not going to implement technology. So why does leadership need to be so heavily involved? Why do they need to run the show? The biggest reason is because Microsoft Teams and much of 365 are what I call group apps. That's not an official Microsoft term, but I call them group apps. It requires a collaboration of many people. It requires everyone's input. Group apps are different than the individual that used to be properly implemented by cramming everybody into a computer lab. Individual apps, I'm talking things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, to an extent, Outlook, because when you're managing Outlook, you're managing your own small part of collaboration. But Teams is a group app, and a leadership team would never dream of throwing a CRM program, an asset management program, or a maintenance management program they would never dream of putting people in a computer lab and saying, oh, here's this wonderful technology. We hope you use it, and then make it optional, or make it optional by default because they don't require its usage. When you're expecting a group of employees to work together, you can't have one or two of them sitting on the sidelines. So these are group apps, not individual apps, and they need to be handled differently. So the next thing I want to compare and contrast is technology-driven implementation versus business-driven implementation. This, too many times when I see teams being, well, pretty much all the time when I see work groups, organizations trying to implement teams, they say, let's implement teams. And with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, those things that work, but this is not your father's Microsoft Office. Teams, SharePoint, Planner, a lot of these 365 apps, as I said, they're group apps, but because it is affecting processes, streamlining processes, facilitating processes, you should have business-driven implementation rather than saying, let's implement teams. So what does that all mean? I'm going to have a few slides here that'll explain that a little better. Technology-driven implementation, as I said, is often obvious when you hear the goal of let's implement Teams or let's implement SharePoint. It's the same for most of the 365 apps. That's technology-driven. Oftentimes, the IT department or the computer guy or maybe an outside trainer comes in and trains, and the focus is on the cool functionality. And yes, Teams has some very cool functionality, but the functionality alone won't carry the day, because honestly, when people leave that training session, they've seen so much cool functionality, they're fired up, and it happens over and over. They try to use Teams and it just fizzles out. And again, technology driven is often can be identified by who's in charge. If the IT department is in charge of implementing Teams, it's probably technology driven implementation. Not the best way. It can also be identified by, like I said, training happens, but then wishful thinking. Leadership is absent or only loosely involved. There's certainly no requirements, no expectations. So they're just saying, boy, I hope this Teams thing takes off, and it never does. Now, trust me, there's hope at the end, so bear with me. It's not all doom and gloom. Another way to identify a technology-driven implementation effort is the Teams environment has very little customization done to it. In its optimal state, Teams is very heavily customized and helps employees do their job. It's not just a place to have virtual meetings or have little instant messaging chats, etc. And what ends up happening is after the training, the power users will go out, they will understand it. They probably will understand how it can help processes because they're techies for the most part. And they get really excited. They move it forward, but because everyone is not involved, they are working in a vacuum. It's no fun posting conversations in a channel and then nobody answers. And after a while, the power users say, why am I even trying? I'm just going to go back to email where everybody else is hanging out. And then it fails.
Hey, Arnie, I'll make a couple comments there if I could. First off, just a question for the group, a little poll if you'd enter in chat. We're just curious if your companies are struggling with this, if that's part of what you're seeing. So if you don't mind, a little update. And then I do want to make a comment because our IT members are vital to the success of the organization and the rollout of the project. We're just saying that leadership also needs to be involved and really needs to be driving it. But if you're in the beginning stages of a project, and let's say that you're currently on Microsoft or you're on Google and you're using Slack and you want to get over onto 365, obviously that's going to be a pretty heavily involved IT. We'd be working very heavily with your IT group, but leadership overall needs to be driving the whole project. So
thanks, Jen. That was a subtle way to say, Arnie, you dug a deep hole. Let me help you out of it.
No. Not at all.
Yeah, no, nobody appreciates the IT people, the computer guys more than I do. I've
Yeah.
got one outside the conference room here who bails me out repeatedly.
We love them.
Keep those people involved for sure,
Yes.
because you do need them, but they should not be leading it. They're
Yeah.
awesome people. They're very talented people for the most part, but they should not be leading this station. Thanks, Jan.
No problem.
So instead of, if you recall from the tech-driven implementation, the goal was let's implement team. Well, what's a better goal? Business-driven is identifiable by goals such as let's reduce the time and effort it takes to communicate internally. If you're familiar with Lean Six Sigma, you're familiar with the term non-value added work. Non-value added work is work that your customers, your clients don't pay for. And when you are collaborating internally with your coworkers, unless you're, I think, a lawyer's office or other hourly chargers, you're not making a profit for your business when you're collaborating with your coworkers. So let's reduce that time. Another possible goal would be let's eliminate the errors in the residential service tracking process. Very specific business goals, and I'll cover that a little bit more later. So again, another way to state that is the focus is on business results, not technology results. Business process owner is in charge rather than the IT department. There's a focus also on process improvement. I like to say Teams and SharePoint, much of the 365 environment is never finished. While that may seem discouraging on the surface, that's a good thing because you want to have an environment of continuous improvement. The technology, Microsoft makes new technology available. Processes change. You think of new solutions to use 365. So they are never done. 365 or Teams and SharePoint are never done, but they're always improving. Simplification and standardization. That process improvement is kind of a way of restating process improvement. You simplify processes, make it easier on employees. The Teams environment is awesome because you can roll so many different apps, so many different resources into Teams and have it right in front of employees where they're working at, right in front of their faces. Standardization, that kind of leads more into the leader's expectations and such. But if you have a best practice within one team, you can quickly take that to another team by replicating their team's environment. So how do you know that something has been implemented with a business-driven purpose? In the end, everyone uses the environment, but power users innovate. They understand the technology better. They're probably people who always get the most done in the least amount of time, but they continually improve. And in parentheses, you see everyone sees the WIIFM. That means what's in it for me.
If you had to tell me what that meant, yeah, I'm like, what?
That's too many letters to be a radio station, but yeah, what's in it for me? If you want people to adopt it, make it very heavy in what's in it for me. And the second webinar in our little mini series focuses on how to make the Teams environment be loaded with what's in it for me so that people will want to use it and hopefully you don't have to force them. So there are two keys to successful business improvement using Teams. The first is strategy. And that's what we help a lot of clients with is, yeah, you can get the IT right and you can say, okay, I get this technology. We're going to improve this process. There's a little bit more to it, but you've got to have strategy. I'll get into the finer points of strategy, but then the second thing you need are expectations. And I covered that a little bit. I'll cover it more in just a moment. Strategy includes who will lead. Again, the person, usually it's not the leader who leads the implementation. The leader's going to delegate to someone. I always recommend that a leader provide me someone who's perhaps an MBA, someone who's a lean expert, someone who's really good at processes and who gets the most done in the least amount of time. Again, I try to shy away from the IT people unless IT people are awesome to lead so long as they are process minded and they understand the business of the company or the organization. So it's great to have IT skills and process skills, but if I have to choose, I'll take the process skills. And when you're developing your business strategy as a leader, you want to ask, what are our most pressing problems to solve, usually around information or collaboration or inner workings. But that's a whole lot of your processes. There's a lot of room there. And also you've got to ask, what are our biggest opportunities? Maybe there's a process that's working okay, but now that I understand this Teams, SharePoint, 365 technology, maybe we can get the same good results we're getting now, but in half the time. Simplify and customize before training. I'll get into that more in the next webinar, but that's a biggie. You don't want to train on a blank canvas. You want to train with a Teams environment that has been customized to match their processes. So that's a part of your strategy. How will we customize and simplify? And here's a biggie. If you think your old shared drives and SharePoints got out of control, you can really get out of control with 365. So you've got to have some strategy around how do we avoid creating information sprawl. I've heard SharePoint called ScarePoint, and SharePoint, if done incorrectly without a strategy, you can't find anything. I've heard the saying, SharePoint is where documents go to die. There's a lot of truth in that. Well, Teams is that times 10 or times 100. So you definitely want a strategy. It's not hard, but it's just good to have someone around who has seen it before and knows what not to do. That I've learned the hard way what not to do, trust me.
I'm going to make another comment there if I could. So to give you all a sense, one of the best practices we've figured out in years of rolling this suite out is on the client side, what we really need is an executive sponsor that understands the bigger strategies for the biggest priorities, and then a project manager. And that project manager is involved in the day-to-day. And so again, at the beginning, the project manager may be involved, maybe more from the technical side if they're helping like figure out the infrastructure, but then it slowly moves over to somebody that has more of a business process improvement skill set. But we always want, in addition to that person that understands process, is an executive member on the leadership team that is aware of the bigger issues and challenges and strategies for the business. And that's where we found success on how we work with companies, just to give you an idea of what it might look like for you.
Right. Yes. And one of the things we often do is we brainstorm all the possibilities and then we prioritize which ones we attack first, because you will find dozens and dozens of opportunities. And someone needs to say, these are our priorities based upon our business need. The leader can do that. So, okay, I need to speed it up just a hair. Expectations. We want happy adoption rather than forced adoption. Happy, again, you want the what's in it for me built in, but participation is still mandatory. Teams will underwhelm, underperform, or flat out fail if you have some people remaining in the old tools and doing business the old way. This is a group application. You've got to treat it as such. Also in expectations, and I'll cover this more in the third part of this series, is what to use when. A lot of the 365 tools, which you roll into Teams, so even though this is about Teams, all of 365 rolls into Teams. It's the hub for 365. There's some overlap in some of those apps. So you've got to say, we want to use this app for that. And then there are other things such as, hey folks, your chat tool, the second button on the left from the top, that's for private conversations. But as a leader, I want you to help us build a knowledge base inside the channels. So if you're solving a problem, having a big decision discussion, please, not please, I want you very strongly to have those discussions in the channel post rather than chat. So those kinds of expectations. And in the third part, I'll reveal a little bit of about how best to get those expectations in front of people and what those expectations should be. Again, continually improve and adjust. It's never done. Processes and technology frequently change. And here's another one. You need gatekeepers to kind of ride herd, look into the document libraries and make sure people are filing correctly and doing things the most efficient way possible per the expectations, but you need to kind of police it. But also once or twice a year, it's good to have a leadership meeting with the IT people in there because they're valuable, but just review your team's interface, the resource tabs, the SharePoint site that's behind the scenes, and also in front of the scenes as the intranet, but review that and say, is this still meeting our needs? Has the technology changed that we need to take advantage of? Those sort of things. And with that, I'm pretty much done. It's like I said, part 2 will be about putting the what's in it for me into the team's environment, heavy customization, and how to get people on board happily rather than in a forced manner.
Awesome. Thanks, Arnie. I'm going to just make a couple comments before I move into my wrap up. Eli, thank you for entering into chat. And you are very typical. A lot of companies were sort of pushed onto 365 because they needed a video conferencing tool. And when they're in there, they're like, hey, cool, what's this chat feature? And that's kind of where they stop, which just sounds like where your organization is. So just for those of you maybe newer to 365 and you're like, why would I want to take this on as a bigger strategy? Arnie makes it sound like I got to get everybody involved or whatever. Just know it is well worth every effort. I think the thing that usually sells most people is when we say, ultimately what's going to happen is all of your internal communication and activities and collaboration and all those things that are happening right now in email are going to move into the 365 suite of tools using various apps. And most people have a sense of calm when they hear the idea that like my email is going to be less of a burden. And so that's, I think, for me, the big sell that gets people over there is there new and improved tools that work much more effectively than email for improving communication and collaboration. So just want to put that little plug in there. So I'm just going to wrap up real quick and then feel free to start entering any questions you have, whether about this topic today more broadly or even like what in the heck is Planner? It doesn't matter. We don't know your skill sets coming into this. So we may have used terms you've never heard of like channel, post. Feel free to say what in the heck is a channel? We'd be happy to answer that. But just to kind of wrap up, when we have these webinar series, a lot of people think the only thing we do is 365. So a couple quick slides. Yes, for sure, what we do is definitely consulting around 365. In particular, we not only help companies optimize the use of 365, but we help get you over there. So we often say we go through an assessment phase to peek under the hood, see how complicated your environment is, where's there opportunity to simplify your technology, save a ton of money, and move things over onto 365, but then also then optimize and solve the business issues when you're on the technology. So we do a lot of that, as Arnie says, through process improvement. So for sure, big area where we spend a lot of time. But in addition, we do a ton with like training, one-on-one coaching, public speaking. I'm a keynote speaker. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do on everything related toward productivity. And so those can be soft skill training as well as technology based. I think some of the hot topics lately have been project management for the everyday leader has been a #1 topic we've been asked to do. How in the heck do you run an effective meeting is another hot topic because we're spending way too much time in meetings and meetings cost a lot of money. So really enjoyed that aspect of our work. And then I think, yeah, just a reminder again that if you found information out in this webinar and you're sort of curious about what's next in the series, sign up for the next webinar, and that's going to get into like what do you mean about customizing the environment for adoption? So that's going to be part 2. And at that point, we can open it up for Q&A. So I don't think I saw any questions come through. And it's a small group, which is awesome. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions whatsoever about 365. Let's start there.
Well, I'll go off mute then and maybe expound on kind of my earlier comment. And I understand what you say about moving communication into Teams, but what I struggle with is we're a heavy Salesforce user and we have a document management system. So we are building all of our business processes in Salesforce. So when you talk about all this business process automation, I'm like, I don't know how it works together. So kind of any insight, like, is it like, oh, you have to switch to Microsoft Dynamics, or is it, there is a hybrid model between those kind of outside systems?
Arnie, you want to give your answer? Or did you have a thought? Otherwise I can answer.
Sure. Full disclosure, I have not worked with Salesforce, but I can tell you most of those apps, we used to call them legacy software, niche software. Salesforce is definitely bigger than niche. But if they're browser-based, you can, without changing how you do business, you can integrate those browser-based third-party softwares into Teams so that then people are working in the same environment as they're doing virtual meetings, as they're doing their chats or what used to be an email. And then you can bring in other resources that the people use and put it beside Salesforce so that employees are not doing so much minimizing and maximizing. And another thing I might add is in my former corporate job, we had this mega asset management program that was awesome in many areas, but we found certain modules of it to be less than desirable. And so in those cases, you know, obviously you can't do away with Salesforce. That's a necessity if you're in sales. But if there are modules in it that don't work well, then you can, using a combination of SharePoint and Teams, don't let that scare you. It's not as complex as it sounds, but you can build solutions using SharePoint lists or such, and then integrate that into Teams to where your end users, the two tabs are right side by side. So that module that you can build a better solution for, like I said, in Salesforce, it's too complex, too cumbersome, you don't like it, whatever, you can have your homegrown solution to sit right beside Salesforce in the same subject matter channel. I hope I'm not talking too much.
No, that's good, Arnie. Let me, Eli, I'll give kind of another angle to it, which I loved Arnie's angle. It is becoming a very complicated world because what's happening is all of the software vendors are adding on more and more functionality. So most of the CRMs that used to be more about like lead management have now moved into, they now have a project management module and they have a workflow module. And so it is really confusing. Like, well, where do we do project management? So be aware of that. And I'm a huge fan of 365, but I would never tell you to go use Dynamics, their CRM tool, because I think it's more complicated than Salesforce and needs to be customized. So Salesforce is a beast, but it's a very good CRM. So what I would say is think of 365 as your communication and collaboration hub where everybody kind of all the pieces and parts fit together. Very similar to what Arnie is saying is you can pull in all these different tools, and there's such tight integration between all of the apps within 365 that drive productivity. So what we typically say is think about what your business issue is, look at 365, and if one of the native apps within 365 can meet that need, it's probably the right tool to use because one, you're already paying for it. Right. Two, it simplifies your technical environment. And three, that integration of pulling things together is huge. And but if it doesn't meet your needs, it's fine. Then bring in, use project management within Salesforce and bring Salesforce into this communication hub. Tell everybody in the company we do lead generation in Salesforce. We also do project management in Salesforce. The key thing is what we're talking about today is leadership really needs to decide how are we using this tool? How is it customized to the way we want to work? And then enforcing that everybody uses Salesforce as project management tool. Does that kind of tie it together?
Yeah, I think that helps a little bit too. And it's back to still kind of my original, like we still don't know what to use it for, because we have so many things solved everywhere else. And, we have Teams because we moved to the cloud, right? A little bit like you said, right? We moved Office to the cloud. So now it's like, do we use it? Do we not use it? What is?
Yeah, and
we don't know what the need is, and so it's helpful.
and we always start with an assessment, but you can, where we find those needs, and there are always needs, but regardless, you have a need for what you may do now with email and meetings. There are things outside of Salesforce business processes that you probably have where they are a spreadsheet where a lot of people interact in the spreadsheet, changing data, consuming the data. There are a lot of other uses for Teams process-wise, and just the things you do day to day just to manage your work world outside of Salesforce. And oh, by the way, you can roll Salesforce into Teams so people aren't jumping back and forth between windows.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And you guys have worked with a couple of our associates, and they have found some of your productivity coaching very helpful.
Yeah, perfect. Any other questions about 365? And I guess the only other comment I'll make is 365 just is the next version of Microsoft. So you will be on it if you're not on it yet. And so it's really just a matter of, are we paying duplicate for duplicate tools is often a driver for many companies. So yeah. Anybody else have any questions, and it could be outside of this general topic today? Anything on 365? Mukadam, I hope I'm saying your name right. I'm guessing you're in the IT group. So I hope it didn't make you ununimportant. We're trying to make sure leadership understands where they fit. So appreciate you being here.
No, absolutely. And I am part of the IT group, yes.
Awesome. Any other questions? Anything about, it can be about productivity too. It doesn't have to be about 365, but. Give you a minute. All right. Well, if there's no questions, we are going to end early. We do not fill the meeting time. So thank you everybody for being here. We appreciate it. If you feel this was an important topic for your leadership, please do go out in a couple of days, grab the link off the CTC Productivity website and send your leader the link if you feel like that's part of your struggle with adoption of 365. So appreciate you being here. Have a great rest of your summer.